My brother Owen disappeared in the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming on the afternoon of September 8th, 2023. He was 34 years old. He was an experienced hiker. He had been on that exact trail twice before. He was carrying a GPS beacon. He had cell reception at the trailhead when he checked in with me at 1:45 p.m. He told me he was starting the loop and would be back at the truck by 5. His last known coordinates place him 4.2 miles from the trailhead on a section of trail that is well marked and well maintained and has been hiked by thousands of people without incident. Between 1:45 and 5 o'clock on that afternoon, my brother vanished from a trail he knew in a forest he had been to before, with a working GPS beacon that stopped transmitting at 2:27 p.m. Nobody has seen him since. This is not a story about what the search teams found. This is a story about what they didn't find, and about what I found when I went looking on my own. I need to go back. Owen and I grew up in Billings, Montana. We were outdoor kids. Our dad had us fishing before we could ride bikes, and hiking before we could drive. Owen was the more serious one about it. By his late 20s, he was doing solo backcountry trips 3 or 4 times a year. Nothing extreme. He wasn't summiting peaks or crossing glaciers. He liked long-day hikes in forests, dense timber, river valleys, the kind of terrain where you don't see another person for hours, and the only sounds are water and wind and your own boots on dirt. He liked to say that the forest was the only place in the world that didn't want anything from him. I always thought that was a strange way to put it. I think about it differently now. On September 8th, Owen drove to the Glacier Lake trailhead in the Shoshone. It's a moderate loop, about 11 miles, mostly wooded, some elevation gain in the middle. He had done it in July of the previous year and told me it was one of his favorites. He texted me from the parking lot at 1:30, said the weather was clear, trail was dry. He said he'd be back by 5 and we'd grab dinner in Cody. I said sounds good. He texted again at 1:45, saying he was starting the hike. That was the last text I ever received from him. At 5:30 he hadn't texted. I called. Straight to voicemail. I called again at 6. Same thing. By 7, I was genuinely worried. Owen was not the kind of person who forgot to check in. He was methodical. He set timers on his watch. He followed plans. At 7:30, I called the Shoshone County Sheriff's Office and told them my brother had not returned from a hike. They took his information and the trailhead location and said they would send someone out. A deputy arrived at the trailhead around 8:15. Owen's truck was still in the parking lot. The deputy radioed for search and rescue. The search began the next morning at first light. I drove to the trailhead and met the search coordinator. They had a team of 12 plus 2 K9 units. The plan was to hike the trail in both directions simultaneously and sweep outward from the path if nothing was found on the main route. I wanted to go with them. They told me I couldn't. Liability, protocol. I stood next to my brother's truck and watched them disappear into the tree line, and I have never felt more useless in my life. The first team came back around noon. They had found his boot prints on the trail, clear prints in the dirt. They followed them for about 4 miles. Then the prints stopped, not gradually, not like he stepped off the trail onto rock. They stopped, one print, then nothing, like he had been standing in one spot and then ceased to exist. The dogs tracked his scent to the same point and then lost it. Not diverted, lost. The handler told me later that in his 15 years working K9 search and rescue, he had seen dogs lose a scent maybe 3 times. Every time it was because the subject had entered water. There was no water within a quarter mile of where the tracks ended. On the second day they found his boots. That detail is the one that keeps me awake. His boots were sitting upright on the trail approximately 30 feet past where his footprints ended. Not thrown, not kicked off in a struggle, placed. side by side, laces still tied, positioned neatly on the edge of the path, as if he had taken them off carefully and set them down with intention. His socks were inside the boots, folded. The search coordinator had been doing this for 20 years, and he told me he had never seen anything like it. He said people who are injured leave boots behind. People who are confused leave boots behind, but they don't untie them and fold their socks and place them on the trail like they're leaving them for someone to find. There was one more detail about the boots that I didn't find out until weeks later. I had to request the search report through a formal records request. In the report, the lead searcher noted that the boots showed normal wear consistent with hiking approximately 4 miles on packed dirt. The soles had the expected amount of dust and debris, but the insoles were warm, not residual body heat warm. The report specifically said the insoles were noticeably warm to the touch, despite the boots having been found sitting in open air on a trail in September at an elevation where the ambient temperature was in the low 50s. The searcher noted it because he thought it was strange. He wrote that the warmth suggested the boots had been removed very recently, even though the footprints around them indicated no recent foot traffic. Nobody has ever explained that. The GPS beacon was found on the 3rd day. It was hanging from a tree branch about 8 feet off the ground, approximately 100 yards from the trail in dense forest. The lanyard was unbroken. The device was undamaged. The battery was dead. The last coordinate it had transmitted was at 2:27 p.m. on September 8th. The coordinate matched the location where his footprints stopped. The beacon had been carried from that point to the tree where it was found. Someone or something had taken it off his pack or his belt and hung it from a branch 8 feet off the ground. I am 5'11". Owen was 6'1". Neither of us could have reached that branch without climbing. The tree itself had no low branches, no footholds, smooth bark. You would need a ladder, or you would need to be something that doesn't need a ladder. They searched for 9 days. Helicopters, ground teams, dogs, drones with thermal cameras. They covered a search radius of 15 miles from the point of last contact. They found nothing else. No clothing, no pack, no food wrappers, no sign of animal attack, no blood, no drag marks, no broken branches suggesting someone had been pulled into the brush. Nothing. One of the canine handlers told me something off the record that has stayed with me. He said in his experience, when a dog loses a scent, the dog gets confused. It circles, it whines, it tries to pick the trail back up. He said Owen's scent didn't fade, it stopped, like a wall. The dog walked up to a point on the trail and refused to go further. Not because it lost the scent, but because it was afraid. The dog sat down and would not move. The handler had to carry it back to the staging area. He had never seen that behavior before in any search. My brother walked 4 miles into the woods, took off his boots, folded his socks, placed his boots on the trail, removed his GPS beacon, and hung it 8 feet up a tree, and then disappeared completely from the physical world. The official status of Owen's case is missing person. There is no evidence of foul play. There is no evidence of an animal attack. There is no evidence of a fall or injury. There is no evidence of anything. The case is open but inactive. Nobody is looking for him. The sheriff's office told me with genuine sympathy that sometimes people walk into the wilderness and don't come back, and they never find out why. I understood what they were telling me. I just couldn't accept it. 2 months after Owen disappeared, I started reading about Missing 411. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it briefly. It's a term coined by a former police detective named David Paulides, who has documented hundreds of disappearances in and around national parks and forests across the United States. The cases share specific characteristics that defy conventional explanation. People vanish in areas they know well. Tracking dogs lose the scent. Shoes or boots are found removed and placed neatly. Personal items are found in locations the missing person could not have reasonably placed them. Search teams find nothing. No body, no remains, no logical trail. The cases span decades and cover almost every state. The National Park Service does not maintain a comprehensive list of people who have gone missing on their land. When asked why, their response is that they've never been required to create one. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm an electrician from Montana. I believe in things I can see and measure and verify, but when I started reading through those cases, I felt something break open inside me, because Owen's disappearance matched the pattern. Every single element. The removed boots, the placed items, the dogs losing the scent, the GPS beacon found in an impossible location, the total absence of physical evidence. He wasn't the first person this had happened to. He was one of hundreds. In December of 2023, I drove back to the Shoshone. I didn't tell anyone, not my wife, not my parents. I told them I was going to a job site in Sheridan. I packed a day pack and drove 3 hours to the Glacier Lake trailhead. I wanted to see the spot where his prints stopped. I needed to stand there. I needed to feel it. I don't know what I expected. I didn't expect answers. I think I just needed to be in the last place he had been before whatever happened happened. I parked in the same lot where his truck had been. It was a weekday in December. The lot was empty. The air was cold and dry and still. Snow had dusted the trail, but not deeply. I started hiking. The forest was quiet in that heavy winter way where even the trees seemed to be holding their breath. I passed the 1 mile marker, then 2, then 3. At 4 miles, I started looking at the ground. The dirt was partially frozen. Any prints from September were long gone, but I knew from the search report roughly where the spot was. About 4.2 miles in there is a slight bend in the trail where the path curves left around a large boulder. That was where his prints had stopped. I stood on that bend in the trail for a long time. I looked at the ground. I looked at the trees. I looked at the sky through the canopy. There was nothing remarkable about the spot. It was just a trail, just trees, just dirt. I didn't feel anything supernatural. I didn't hear voices or see shadows. It was just a cold, quiet stretch of forest that happened to be the last place my brother existed. I took a few pictures. I said his name out loud. I don't know why. It just came out. I said Owen. Not yelling, just at a normal volume, like I was standing next to him. Then I waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. An echo, a response, something. There was nothing. I was about to turn around and head back when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. About 40 feet off the trail to the right, there was a tree with a mark on it, not a blaze like the ones trail crews use to mark paths. This was different. It was a series of scratches in the bark, deep enough to expose the white wood underneath. They were arranged vertically, 5 lines, close together, evenly spaced, like something had dragged 5 blades down the trunk. I walked over and looked at them. They started at about 7 feet up the trunk and ran down to about 4 feet. The scratches were clean, not weathered, not old, and they were on the side of the tree facing away from the trail. You would never see them from the path. You would only see them if you were standing in the woods looking back toward the trail, or if you were looking at the trees while being pulled deeper into the forest. I took photos of the marks. I stood there for a while trying to come up with an explanation. A bear. Bears scratch trees, but bear scratches are usually irregular. Different depths, different spacing, claw marks that curve and overlap. These were straight, parallel, even, 5 lines. I have never seen a bear make marks like that. I looked at the surrounding trees. 2 more had the same marks, same height, same pattern, both on the side facing away from the trail, both deeper in the forest than the first, like a series of markers leading away from the path and into the dense timber. I followed them with my eyes. There was a fourth tree with marks even further in, then a fifth, each one deeper, each one further from the trail, each one pointing in the same direction, away from the path, into the thick of the forest where the canopy closes and the undergrowth gets heavy and the light starts to thin. I did not follow them. I want to be very clear about that. I did not leave the trail. I stood at the edge of the path, and I looked at those marks disappearing into the trees, and every single cell in my body told me not to take another step. It was the same feeling I imagine Owen might have felt at some point that afternoon before whatever happened. That feeling where your brain is still looking for logic, but your body has already decided. I turned around and I walked back to the trailhead faster than I have ever walked in my life. About a mile into the walk back, I noticed something else. The forest had gone completely silent. Not quiet, silent. When I had hiked in there had been birds, jays calling from the canopy, a woodpecker somewhere in the distance. Now there was nothing. No wind, no birds, no sound of water, even though I knew there was a creek running parallel to the trail, about 200 yards to the left. I have spent my entire life in the outdoors. I know what a quiet forest sounds like. This was different. This was the absence of sound, like the forest had been emptied, like everything that lived in it had left at the same time and for the same reason. I didn't run. Running felt wrong. Running felt like it would attract attention. I walked, briskly, with purpose, and I did not look behind me, not once, not even when I heard a branch snap somewhere in the trees to my right, about 2 miles out. Not even when I swore I heard footsteps keeping pace with me, just beyond the tree line, heavy, deliberate, matching my speed exactly, step for step. When I sped up, the footsteps sped up. When I slowed slightly, they slowed. Whatever was out there was not trying to close the distance. It was maintaining it, like it was escorting me, like it was making sure I kept walking in the direction I was going and didn't turn around. At one point, about a mile from the trailhead, I heard something that made my vision go white for a second. A voice, or what sounded like a voice, coming from the trees to my right, where the footsteps had been. It was a single sound, one syllable, low and resonant, like a word spoken underwater. I couldn't tell what it said. I don't think it was a word. I think it was something trying to make a word, like something that had heard human speech, but didn't quite understand how to produce it. The sound lasted maybe 2 seconds, and then stopped. The footsteps stopped with it. The silence returned, but a different silence now, heavier, closer, like the air had thickened around me. I kept my eyes forward and I kept walking, and I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot. When I stepped out of the tree line and onto the gravel, the sounds came back. All of them. Birds, wind, a truck on the highway in the distance, like someone had turned the volume back on. I stood at the edge of the lot and turned around and looked at the trail entrance. Nothing was there, just the path disappearing into the pines, just shadows and timber, and the quiet start of a trail that I will never set foot on again. I sat in my truck for almost an hour before I could drive. I was shaking, not from cold, from something I still don't have a word for. I drove home. I didn't tell my wife about the marks. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell the sheriff. I couldn't figure out how to explain what I had seen and heard without sounding like I had lost my mind. 5 scratch marks on a tree is not evidence of anything. A series of marked trees leading into the forest is not proof that something took my brother. Footsteps that match your pace are not proof that something was following you. A sound that might have been a voice is not proof that something was trying to speak to you. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know how those marks were spaced. I know the direction they were pointing, And I know that whatever made them was not a bear, and whatever was walking beside me on the way out was not a deer or a moose or any animal I have ever shared the woods with in 31 years of living in Montana. It has been over a year since Owen disappeared. His case is still open. Nobody is looking for him. I go to the trailhead sometimes, not to hike. I just sit in the parking lot and look at the tree line. I don't know what I'm looking for. Maybe I'm hoping to see him walk out. Maybe I'm hoping to see something else walk out, so I can finally know what happened. My parents have accepted it. My mother says he's in a better place. My father doesn't say anything. My wife thinks I need to move on. She's probably right, but I can't stop thinking about those boots. Side by side on the trail, laces tied, socks folded inside, placed there with care, like he was leaving them behind on purpose. Like wherever he was going, he didn't need them anymore. Like something had convinced him that the ground he was about to walk on was not the kind of ground that requires shoes. I went back to the trailhead one more time. Last month, January, snow was heavier this time. I almost didn't go, but something pulled me there. I parked. I walked to the edge of the tree line, but I didn't enter. I just stood there looking in. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. I looked at the trees. I looked for the marks. The first tree was still there, but the marks were gone. The bark had grown over them, smoothed out like they had never been there. I checked the second tree. Same thing. Clean bark, no scratches. I checked the third. Nothing. Every single mark that I had photographed that day in December was gone. Trees don't heal that fast. I know that. Anyone who has spent time in the woods knows that. Deep scratches in bark take years to fill in. These had disappeared in 13 months. I still have the photos on my phone. I checked them in the parking lot. The marks are clearly visible in the images. Straight, deep, 5 lines. But the trees in front of me were smooth. I don't have an explanation for that. I don't have an explanation for any of it. The boots, the beacon, the prints that stop, the scent that vanishes, the marks that appear and then heal. I just have questions, and the forest is not answering them. The last thing I want to say is this. If you hike in national forests alone, please tell someone where you're going and when you expect to be back. Carry a beacon, stay on the trail, and if you ever find yourself on a path and something feels wrong, if the air goes still, if the birds stop, if you feel like you're being watched from the trees, turn around, walk back to your car. Do not investigate. Do not follow anything into the forest that you can't explain. My brother was experienced and strong and smart and prepared, and he still disappeared without a trace from a trail he had walked before. Whatever is out there, it does not care how prepared you are. It does not care how experienced you are. It just waits. And when it's ready, it takes you, and nobody ever finds out where you went.